Hey, my name is Sarah.
My name is Mujib.
And welcome to another episode of Let's Get To It. This is episode 21, and we are going to talk about adaptation.
Yeah. I love that the last episode in 2020 was episode 20, and the first in 2021 is 21.
That is awesome. We obviously planned that. No, we didn't. It was meant to be.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
It was written in the stars. You should check out that episode if you haven't.
Yeah.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Happy New Year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How was your New Year's, Mujib?
It was mellow. I think I was asleep by 8:30.
That's awesome.
Woke up pretty early and got to it. We're speaking of adaptation, we're kind of like night weaning's aid right now. Mm-hmm. So, it's like a lot of like just me walking him around at night sort of idea, and like sleeping in a little bed with him next to his crib, so that he doesn't need to nurse in the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we're getting ready for that. You know, I think we built a crib that Thursday, and then Friday came, then we just hung out,
That's awesome.
How about yours? Did you do something extra?
Super mellow. No, this pandemic has brought out sort of how actually introverted I really am. As an extroverted sort of fitness personality, I'm actually I do like to be mellow at home, and I've never really been all about the fanfare of New Year's Eve. So it was quiet the way I wanted it, no expectations. Very, very happy.
Did you stay up till midnight?
We were awake. We were not watching balls dropping or anything like that.
Right.
But yeah, it wasn't super intentional. We were like, if we're going to be up, we're up. If we fall asleep beforehand, we fall asleep. So, which for me is the best way, like for it just to be organic.
Yeah.
Slept in a little bit. It's good.
Right. I love New Year's. I've always loved New Year's a lot. This pandemic was different. Like even last year we were out on Church Street with Zaid, going to the different shows that were going on. We had one of those kind of passes, like pass it was, the highlight or whatever.
Yep.
And that was pretty awesome because then we could just go from like one show to the next show to the next show, and it was probably
all
the
access
most
pass.
Yeah, it was an all access pass.
Yeah.
Exactly. It was the most mellow New Year's that I've had, and it was really one of the first ones that I kind of like turned in early because my baby was like 4 months old, so we're like, all right, we got to get him back, and I was like kind of anxious, you know what I mean? So it was nice to have this one that was just way more mellow than that.
Yeah. And I mean, who knows? Maybe, full disclosure, I was out last year. But who knows? Maybe next year, if we can be, maybe I'll be more into it.
Oh yeah, totally.
Who knows?
I'll shoot some fireworks off the balcony or something.
Exactly. There were fireworks in downtown Burlington, which I was lucky enough to see from my.
You can see them from your balcony. Oh,
right.
that's so rad.
So that was cool.
Yeah.
But
I love fireworks too.
Yeah. But it's the new year, and if one thing has become incredibly obvious of the last year is sort of the need to adapt, make some changes. So yeah, we're going to kind of dive into that a little bit.
Yeah,
what that looks
totally.
like, what it feels like.
Right.
Like definitely feels like something, and it's not easy for everybody. For some people it comes more naturally, maybe.
Right.
Or just, and others it's tough.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to acknowledge that, for folks. I love change. I'll put that out there.
Right.
I love it.
Just the challenge of it? Or?
Love the challenge. I love leading the charge, blazing the trail. It's, I can get bored, very easily. So, and I'm someone that seems to be, I've been thinking about this, that in my professional life, certainly, and my personal life, I'm like, I feel like I'm always moving, I'm always restarting, I'm always, I'm on a path, but I'm like, why does this keep happening? And I'm like, maybe it keeps happening because that's how I thrive. Like I can handle it. It keeps happening. So I don't know, there's something about it sort of fuels me. So, as difficult as this year has been, and that's not to negate that, because it's been and 2020 was hard, but I'm like, let's do this.
Right. You've adapted to change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you're not just that you are adapting to change, but you've adapted like in the sense of adaptation. Like you've become proficient at things being pulled out from under your feet or having to pivot like you're conditioned at it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
When I think about adaptation, I think largely because, you know, it's like if I'm reading about adaptation, it's probably coming from some sort of exercise science standpoint, just because that's where I'm coming, that's the avenue I'm coming into this conversation from. But at the same time, like once we become proficient physically at adapting to stress, then it becomes easier to adapt to other stresses, right? So like if I'm a beginning exerciser, then those first weeks of lifting weights feels pretty like kind of maybe it beats me up or discourages me or something else. But if I'm like a seasoned weightlifter, then all of a sudden if I'm a barbell lifter and you put a kettlebell in my hand, in maybe just a fraction of time that it took me to get good and proficient at the barbell, it takes me that much less time to get proficient and good at the kettlebell. And then if you introduce something like a steel mace, some other sort of like odd object training, then my body's going to adapt to that pretty quickly, because it's almost as if like, it's almost like there's a way to train the ability to adapt to stress, not just to train specifically to the stress, but almost the ability to adapt to any stress that comes.
Yeah.
You know, it's like almost training your balance so that you don't get knocked over. That's going to apply to the wind pushing you, or a wave hitting you, or somebody bumping into you, or you slipping. Like if you can adapt your own center of gravity to the situation that you find yourself in, then anything can happen to you. You can be on a skateboard, snowboard, skis, on ice, whatever, and still manage to keep your feet underneath you.
Okay, I love where this is going. And I want to dig a little deeper here. So what would be in your adaptation toolkit?
Wow.
So what do you think folks need? You know, we can talk about this and just
yeah.
kind of like flesh this out a little bit. You know, it's like, okay, how do we get good at adapting? If there's someone listening right now and they're like, oh man, this is just, I hate change, or this is really hard. It's like, what's in that toolkit?
Right.
Or like, what's important to develop?
It goes back to the original, like kind of the theme of this podcast, which is know thyself. Like self-awareness is, I think, the key to adaptation, period. Like it's being able to ask yourself and ascertain the information about how you feel, right? Like if I know how this is making my body feel, if I know that, oh, it's comfortable versus it's uncomfortable, or it's painful versus it doesn't feel painful at all, then my ability to kind of like find the edges of what I'm doing or recalibrate myself, it's that much greater, right? It's like having your own bearings, you know, having a bearings on yourself, like
that compass.
Totally, that compass. Or even like the car, it's like, you know, if I'm driving a car, I'm facing the dashboard, I'm facing the windshield, like, and the car can be facing any direction. It could be spinning around in circles as I'm reacting and responding to this tailspin. But if my orientation is still where it needs to be in front of me, my hands on the wheel, then I'm gonna be better off adapting. So self-awareness, knowing where we are in space, where we are in time, where we are in our own path or planning process, even if we don't have a plan or know that that's our path right now, if I can say that I am here, I am I right now, then I'm going to have a better time at adapting to somebody changing what my external situation might be, you know.
And kind of with that, you know, knowing yourself, trusting yourself, I think is a huge thing too. Or having faith. I know we've talked about this previously. Having some sense of faith in whatever spiritual realm or other that you think of, that things are going to be okay. And I think that's a big one, you know, and because that can be really scary, because I think a lot of when we're faced with change, or we're faced, you know, there's some big shift that you weren't expecting. And I'm not an epidemiologist, so I was pretty blindsided by this whole pandemic thing. But what I found strength and comfort in is actually this sort of faith that it's going to be okay, and I do trust myself in my judgment, and some combination of that. So yeah, I think there's a lot of intangibles kind of within this, right? Like, I
love faith. I love that that's where you took it, though, because faith is probably one of the greatest tools for adapting, is to know that, like, you're like, I'm still standing here, you know, I'm still here, and if I take this step and that step and that step, then I have faith that I'm going to get there. You know what I mean? That sort of idea.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge. I'm trying to think of other things. You know, I posed the question, but I'm also trying to figure out, like, what is the answer? You know, or what would I, we're not into dispensing advice necessarily, but I do think it's an interesting question of like, okay, well, what does that toolbox look like, and how do we cope, when things aren't going our way or aren't going as expected. And it's just something, like pandemic or not, we're all going to be faced with huge challenges and changes and the unexpected, and that's life. And how you weather that, how you deal with that, is just either it's going to feel like you're constantly pushing a boulder uphill, or, are you going against the wind, or are you going with the sea change, with the winds? Like, is it behind you? Is it helping you? One thing that I often say when I'm teaching cycling class, and I'll talk, I'll set the class up for a sprint, and I'll frame it this way. I'll say, what? I want to be running to something and not away from something. It's just like a little shift. I want to be running towards, not away from, because running away from, I don't know, at least for me, it just feels like, okay, I'm running scared. I'm running away from something. I got to get away, Running towards something almost feels like I'm running towards that light, or I'm running towards that goal, So I don't know. It's just a thing that I at least tell myself. I don't know. I mean,
like that.
Are you running from a burning building, or are you running to the mountaintop? I don't know. I mean, both could be happening, right? Like, okay, but I don't know. So
that's cool. I mean, that's perspective, and it goes back to what I saw something I was just about to say in terms of the toolkit, but it's like communication. Being able to communicate that idea, and just as you said it just now, and just as you'll listen to it again when you hear this podcast again, you'll probably be defining it that much more, figuring out how to communicate that idea to yourself even that much better. So I think about communication in that toolkit for adaptation. That's communication with somebody else, right? So being able to let you know the change that I'm going through, and maybe in letting you know it, you can help me reinforce it, and then it becomes easier for me to understand the changes. Or maybe you've gone through a similar change in your life, and then you can give me advice that allows me to understand what change that I'm making. But it's also being able to communicate with myself, like, am I running towards something, or am I running away from something? Am I scared of this situation, or am I confident that of the next situation? You know what I mean? So on and so forth. Like, being able to communicate what I'm actually feeling right now, and where I'm feeling it. I was sitting with a group of people, and we were talking about certain emotions, and when certain traumatic experiences come up, where people feel that in their bodies. Like, do you get butterflies in your stomach if we talk about a car accident, or do you get a little soreness in your neck? Things like that. Like, where does our body hold stress? Where does our body hold tension when we're about to well up? Like, not everybody's shoulders go up towards their ears when they're about to cry. Some people's shoulders go down towards the floor when they're about to cry. You know what I mean? It's but if I can communicate with myself, like, what does this feeling mean? What is this feeling in the pit of my stomach? Is it fear? Is it anxiety? Or is it anticipation? Is it excitement? Those different things. So again, being able to communicate is also a great tool when approaching change or adaptation.
And I love anything and everything that can connect kind of the physical world, I don't know, with their our internal self, because there's just our body, just the more we're tuned in, like, to that intuition or that sort of inner knowledge. I was involved in I took a great course on, the subject was intuitive eating, but it was so much more than that. And really the umbrella was really getting in touch with the self. And, whether that's, of course, this was more specific to, your hunger cues and sort of mindfulness. But it can be extrapolated to so many things, really knowing how your body physically, viscerally responds to certain situations and what that might mean, and paying attention to those things. Like, I'm one of those people, everything goes straight to the throat.
Wow.
Like, if I'm getting emotional, it's like the throat starts to close, or I get that lump.
Wow.
And that's really interesting. I don't know, does that have to do with my throat chakra, my communication? I could do some more work to investigate that.
Right.
But just thinking about it right now, like, what physically, like, and my gut too, definitely. I have a lot of, like, oh, my tummy's upset kind of
Right,
kind of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
With a lot going on in the gut. Still working on that. But yeah, it's just we touched on it, last week. Like, what is this journey but to get to know ourselves?
Right.
And then and the people that we bring into the stratosphere, are also helping aid in that process. And it's what a service to each other.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
I think about it that way. What a get. It's just so cool. I mean, I don't know. And bringing it back to just adaptation and change, it's a beautiful thing. Again, we've talked about this so many times, thinking about the person that we were, who you were at 30, you've got your birthday coming up this month.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Oh, that's
I love
awesome.
my birthday so much.
Yeah.
It's like my fave.
Oh, that's so awesome. And, who the snapshot of like who we were in 5-year increments and things like that. And I just look back and I'm so pleased and thrilled that I'm no longer my previous self. And not like I wasn't a horrible person or something, but I'm just I'm loving this evolutionary change and this continuous growth.
Which is truly an adaptation to because it's easy to think about adapting as, again, there's an external change that's just happened in my life. I got a new job and now my family needs to deal with my new hours and I have to deal with this new commute. I'm adapting to my situation. Or I came home and, my apartment building was on fire. So now, gosh, I didn't have any insurance for my apartment and now my shit is all burned up. Now I have to adapt to this new situation that I'm dealing with. But again, if we look at adaptation like based on exercise, right, and we say like, okay, I want to do this new course of study, right, but in order for me to be able to do this new online program, I have to be able to read faster, right? So, and I don't really feel like I can keep up with it. So I'm going to start to read shitty novels. Like I'm going to read like shitty science fiction novels that I can just chew up. Or like I'm going to read Stephen King's whole catalog and just read like these shitty horror stories about all sorts of shit. And I'm just going to chew these words up because I'm trying to make my brain adapt to taking in information and to comprehending it. It's like reading comprehension. Like maybe in school somebody doesn't really like what they have to read in the English, but they're actually reading like fucking Chaucer on the side because they love these other stories and they love the way that writing is going on. So again, we can do these certain things to help ourselves adapt to become this person that we're trying to become. And I think about that oftentimes when I do think about evolving as a person, and the way that you just said it really made me think about it in this way, because I've been kind of considering, I do a lot of like 7-year work, right? So like I met my wife 7 years ago. She's 7 years younger than me. You know what I mean? So it just makes sense for me to look at like, okay, well, in 7 years, she's going to be as old as I am. Like, what was I doing when I was 30 years old? What was I thinking? Because it's easy to, especially if we're in a relationship where we're older with somebody or have like what we'd perceive as having more experience in the thing. Like I've had a business for longer, so I might seem more adept to doing that thing. But I have to ask myself like, well, what did I know 7 years ago? And like, how, or even just knowing myself, like I've been doing a lot of work on myself. So if I'm looking at somebody next to me and they're right on their path of doing their work, like I can't fault them because it's like trying to teach somebody from where I came from versus where I'm at. Like I can't fault you for making mistakes or falling back on something or backsliding or something like that, because you just started. Like I'm 7 years into it. I've been working very hard at this, so I'm adapted to doing it. My whole being has adapted to it. I know what I need to do in the morning to be able to do this. It's like exercise again. You might show up at your first spinning class and fucking want to puke afterwards, but then you realize like, damn, I don't need to come to the 7 o'clock class. I got to go to the 9 o'clock class so I can have a little bit of extra breakfast. Or maybe if I'm going to go to the 7 o'clock class, I can have a little bit of food. And then all of a sudden, like, you're adapting. Your adaptation becomes easier because you're communicating your needs and what you need. So I think about that in terms of change and evolution itself, because if we're dealing with a friend group or a community base or like somebody who's like, man, you've really changed, you're not who you used to be. It's like, nah, I'm adapting to the situation that I found myself in. Like I looked around and I saw where we were and I saw where I was and I saw the move that I had to make to get to where I wanted to go. And what you're witnessing is the adaptation of that. It goes back to the caterpillar and the butterfly.
Yeah.
Like I'm not a caterpillar. Like I became a butterfly. I started flying around now. You know what I mean? So like I loved walking around there. I did. I totally loved climbing on those branches. It was so sweet, like hanging upside down with you all day long. But now I'm on this flight mission where I'm trying to procreate. You know, and I'm trying to pollinate all these flowers and shit. And this is a whole different life. And like, it's hard. It took me a while to figure out how to use these wings.
Yeah.
Like at first I had to lay low for a while because the first time I tried to fly out there, I almost got eaten. So I had to fucking fall back and realize like, okay, this is a whole different ball game that I'm in right now.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about that in metaphorical terms as like relationships with people, like, give me a little bit of space here. I'm trying to figure out how to use these wings. Like, give me some leeway. Give me a little bit of softness. Like, do that for each other. And that goes back to communication. Like, you know, we're witnessing each other at these great points of adaptation all the time because we're always adapting to stress. We're always adapting. And stress doesn't have to be like a negative thing. Stress can simply be, I want to maintain a good relationship with my partner. And so I'm going to take a couple extra steps in this direction that I wouldn't normally take. And that doesn't have to be like a pounding on my emotional state. It could just be like dealing with a little bit of discomfort, like turning in a little bit earlier, or staying up a little bit later. If you have a partner on the other side of the country and you're trying to communicate with them, like maybe I gotta wake up a little bit earlier to communicate with that person, or stay up a little bit later depending on the time zone. Adapt to your situation. You know?
Oh, dude, I just love everything you just said. I'm like, I'm getting weepy over here. One thing, a word just kept flashing in my head: compassion. Compassion. Especially with, I love that you brought up, you know, we're all on a journey and a particular trajectory at a different time. Like, okay, we can say this is 2021. By the way, it's 1399. That is the year in Iran right now. So let's not be too self-centered about what year it is. It's not 2021 in all parts of the world.
Right.
Shout out to my Iranian family. So it's going to be 1400 in March. So they're coming up on a turn of the century. So anyway, table that for a second. But to have compassion for people on their journey and their path and where they are at. And I just love that you said, you know, a couple of things were coming up for me, right? Like, okay, if you've owned your business for X amount of years and then you are dealing with someone who's just getting started, having that compassion, thinking about like all you had to learn, the mistakes and other things, but also recognizing that I have had incredible relationships with people much younger than me where I'm like, you are wise beyond my fucking years. Like, you might be 21, but there's an 80-year-old soul in your body because I'm learning so much from you. Like, we can get so caught up in our age on this earth, which may or may not have anything to do with the knowledge, the wisdom, what that person has personally cultivated.
Right.
You know, I even think back to the self-care episode where I'm like, you know, Mujib is way better at self-care. I'm still learning so much. We're pretty much the same, you know, we're a year apart, you and I. But, you know, years difference in certain things, depending on what that is, depending on what someone has individually worked on, cultivated, you know, whatever. And so, you know, just having compassion for each other. And what that leads me to think of, too, is sort of on this journey of awakening and this trajectory that the universe is going in towards justice, social justice, racial justice, you know, global, you know, climate, all you know, all of these things under this big umbrella. I'm taking a class actually starting this month on calling in instead of calling out. And this idea of having compassion that, you know, bringing people to the table, that this is about like bringing people in, bringing people together, and not just sort of like canceling, shunning, shaming. What does that do at the end of the day? Like, I want people to grow into that positive, like, you know, like I want people on this bus, you know? So what does shutting someone down and banishing them, you know, on this journey? Okay, like, it's not that it's someone's job to do, you know, people have to come to this, like, people have got to do the work. But, you know, the more, compassion is just the word that I think of. So I'm really excited to to read this material and take this course on like what does that calling in actually look like, and how does that function in terms of, you know, social justice, and like how does that function, how does that help. But yeah, I just kind of kept thinking of that, just this recognition that, you know, and we also have to recognize and say, like, some people aren't going to get on the bus. They're not on the bus in this lifetime. And, you know, there's definitely, you know, when to say sort of like, all right, you're not on the bus. You're never going to get on the bus. Bye. You know, we've talked about drawing those lines and like the people that are coming with us, what's not coming with us. But there are, I do believe there's more people doing the work than aren't doing the work. And the people that aren't willing to adapt, I mean, they're like, we mentioned this before, you know, they're either adapt or die, or adapt and turn into something completely different. And the Kraken. we need to have the B-roll, the B-side of these conversations. But yeah, that's just kind of where my mind was going. Compassion for those that are, and I can catch myself doing that with my partner who is newer into entrepreneurship and starting a business, and I'm a lot more seasoned at it. Sometimes I'm like, or do you gotta do it, you know? And I had to catch myself sometimes. Like, all right, it's okay. Like, you had to figure a lot of stuff out. Have compassion, have a little grace, you know? And that's just something, you know, to practice constantly.
And it takes adaptation. You know, it takes first like setting that as a goal or an intention, like to be more compassionate.
Yeah.
And then to be able to be compassionate with ourselves when we backslide from that again. You know, it's like I'm really big. I think that's my whole thing about self-care, like why I'm so good at it, is because I have a lot of it sounds so funny, but I empathize with myself. You know,
that's
like
awesome.
I know what I've been through
Yeah.
to be here. Like I've heard my prayers in the middle of the night. You know what I mean? Like I know the fear that I've overcome, or the doubt, or the self-doubt. Like I know the path that I took to become this version of myself, who I am. So because of that, like I said, you know, like take a double bubble bath, you know what I mean? Like if the bubble bath calls for like 4 drops of bubbles, like put 8 drops of bubbles in it, you know what I mean?
Double bubble
because
bath.
It's like, why not? Like, why not? Like I know what if you did all the shit that I do for myself, for me, I'd fucking buy you a car. You know what I mean? Like I'd do so much for you. I'd be so happy, so grateful for you if you did all the work for me that I do for myself. You know what I mean? If you got up at 4 o'clock in the morning and sent all those emails and wrote all those programs and edited that podcast, like I'd have a lot of thanks for you when I woke up in the morning. You know, I'd go get you a croissant or something, whatever you like. I'd want to give it to you. You know what I mean? And so we have to be able to, like, I have to be able to do that for myself. But I had to adapt to that. Like in the very beginning, I did a fucking whole bunch of shit that doesn't serve me actually. And then the next year it was pared down a little bit. The next year it was pared down a little bit, until now it's streamlined. Like I know the things that are going to serve me the best. I know it's not. I know what I don't need to beat myself up about. Like all those different things. So again, it's like having that compassion with ourselves as we go through the path of adaptation to this new reality that we're giving ourselves, new stress that we're putting on our own plates, or new position that we're trying to hold, or new person that we're trying to become. You know, like we live in a beautiful time period where people are changing their entire identities. You know what I mean? And then we all get to have to learn how to adapt to that. You know, my friend is not Becky anymore. My friend is now Beckham, and he doesn't use her pronouns anymore. And you know what I mean? But I might have known this person my whole life. You know what I mean? And always knew that person is Becky. Now I have to adapt, right? So again, we have all these different, I guess, different categories of adaptation, right? But it comes back to the same sort of thing, is that if you're seasoned at adapting to your situations and adapting to stresses that we're putting on top of ourselves, then we can apply that to every category. You know, I had a friend of mine who's a train rider, like will ride a train, like hop a train in a freight yard or whatever. And they were trying to get to Vermont. I think they were in North Dakota. They jumped on a train, and then they realized they were in Indiana. Like they woke up in the morning and they were in Indiana. and they were like, oh shit, like I'm supposed to be in Vermont like tonight, you know, and I'm in Indiana now because I jumped on the wrong train, and the train went a place that I didn't think it was going to make, or maybe a train, I don't know what happened to this person, why they ended up in Indiana, but you know, now you got to adapt.
Yeah.
now you got to figure out, like, how do you get from where you are to where you're going?
Yeah.
Well, first you got to figure out, like, where are you actually on this earth right now? And what's the track that's going to get you back to where you needed to be? You know? So we were talking about that last week as far as, like, the train stopping and me having to pick everything up and then go back and then make the turn that I needed to make that I missed. It's like that with adaptation, too. And I think about that a lot with exercise, because it's like with kettlebells, you know, you can think you're doing great until you go up and weight, and then all of a sudden everything falls apart. It's like, oh shit, like, did I miss something back there when I should have learned some actual specific principle? Maybe I did. Maybe I have to backtrack, right? Maybe, you know, I'm just starting exercise in 2021, and I'm like, every day I'm gonna wake up and work out and take a run, and then this morning is the first day I didn't wake up and take a run. Let your body adapt. Like, you're adapting to a new stress. Like, you have to give it the time. Like, the butterfly doesn't just, like, the caterpillar doesn't go to sleep and then just wake up with wings like sprouted out the back. Like, it takes a snake a long time to get from that skin to this new skin, you know. There's a cycle. There's a cycling time, you know.
Oh, I love that too, on the, you know, and the just bringing it back to fitness and sort of the concept of training, because, you know, it's really interesting. When I think I mentioned this to you when I started training with you, that I really appreciated the strength training and the kettlebell training, because I'm very adept at cycling, you know, cardio, like, you know, to the, you know, those of you that maybe work out more frequently, you start to notice that, oh, you actually burn less calories doing that thing because your body's adapted. It's become quite efficient at doing the thing. So, you know, this is where I don't really like to get into comparisons, but, you know, with all the gadgets and gizmos and not focus too much. But when I was a little bit more into that, you know, I might compare, like, oh yeah, how did that ride go for you? And if we use certain metrics, oh yeah, you know, people love posting certain things, like, oh yeah, I burned 600 calories. I'm like, really? I burned 350. We did the same ride. I was going hard, you know, and I'm like, but my body has adapted. It's going to be as efficient as possible to not expend all these calories, because I've got to do that thing 3 times today. Right? So of course I'm going to be in a different category than someone that's, you know, they spend 3 times a week, you know? So it's always helpful, you know, and again, the more kind of you know yourself, right? Like, okay, yeah, I've just gotten real good at that. So it's been fun coming to kettlebells, for example, and like talking about being sore, feeling stuff in a different way, or just, you know, using, you know, even just a different system in my body to like strength train. You know, where I'm an endurance athlete, so it's really fun to just hit kettlebells, and yeah, feeling different. So I love that. So even, you know, yeah, it's January. We can, you know, it's a big month for fitness. Let's just say it. You know, a lot of people are maybe starting a new program or recommitting themselves, if that sounds like you. But it's just, you know, the importance of also kind of mixing up that training too, because the body is going to get, you know, super efficient at whatever it does. So, you know, for some folks who may be results based oriented, you know, my advice is always like, yeah, like mix that up a little bit, or you got to have a little bit of this, a little bit of that, that training. But it's just, yeah, it's really interesting to remind. I don't like to, you know, people say, oh, ask me what I do to train or ask me what I eat. I really don't like those questions. I get uncomfortable with them because I'm like, I'm in a different category, and not like I'm not any better than anyone else per se, but like this is what I do for a living. And so, and I've adapted for that lifestyle. Right. So I would never recommend that someone do 3 classes or eat whatever, you know, eat my diet or eat this way, like unless they've been doing what I've been doing for the last 8 years. Right.
Because I'm sure it wasn't as easy as it is now 8 years ago.
This is actually a great point. So I remember, I can go back, this is sometimes, you know, social media creating this, you know, record, this public diary. I can go back, and I had a full-time desk job prior to opening a spinning studio and literally becoming virtually one of the only instructors of that business. So going from working 40 to 55 hours per week at a desk to now teaching 3 spin classes a day, I can tell you it was the most physically painful transition
Holy shit.
of my life, because there was no taper. There was no like slowly,
Right.
it was like 0 to 100 real quick. Like, and so I had this Instagram post, and it comes up occasionally, like the year anniversary, because Facebook is great about being like, 25 years ago you were doing this. They weren't around that long. Like, great, thanks Facebook. And I had this picture of petroleum jelly, icy hot, this sort of like medicine cabinet, Gatorade, Pedialyte. I mean, just this like all of these tools in my toolbox that I was sore, I was chafed, I was dehydrated,
Damn, yeah.
And I wouldn't recommend this, but I went through this insane body transformation in 90 days from switching this lifestyle, and my body couldn't keep up with it, and eventually like my body leveled off to where it needed to be. But I remember my family was like, what the hell is going on? Like, is this safe for you? Is this good? Like, is this good? And I'm like, I wouldn't recommend doing this, but I mean, I was literally like, it was like a crash course into what it was like to be, I don't call myself a professional athlete because that comes with its own list of assumptions, but I mean, someone with a desk job to training like 4 hours a day.
Right.
Without like any steps in between.
Right.
And I didn't really know what I was doing. I mean, I knew how to teach a spin class, but in terms of like training like an athlete, eating like an athlete at that level, no previous experience. Like nothing to, I just did it because I'm stubborn as fuck. But I'm like, I'm not, so it was really, really interesting. Now I know a little bit more. Like, what do I need for sleep? What do I need for, all these other things I've learned.
Holy shit. That's so heavy to me, because it's literally like, I think about that oftentimes, and I'll say it, and I probably have said it on the podcast, like if you gave this version of me all of the responsibility and everything that I'm going to have to do in 10 years to tomorrow, I would be completely overwhelmed. Most of the shit, like, I probably don't even know how to do yet. You know, some of those things I probably haven't even interacted with yet.
Yeah.
Like, you'd be speaking a different language to me, right? There might be some sort of skill that I pick up along the way that I didn't even realize that I'm going to have, and I didn't even go for another 5 years from now. So if you put, like, let's say that, like, my plan is to have 3 kids or something like that. That means I wake up tomorrow and I have 3 children.
Yeah. Cool.
And I'm 47.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, come on, I'm 37. Like, I missed all of that shit. Like,
Yeah.
I just woke up tomorrow as that person. That's a lot of time. So the reason why I bring it all up is because you basically saw this version of yourself then, and you tried to step off the desk and do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was a crash course.
And you had the passion enough, and you were at least able to communicate with yourself enough that you did level off. You know, your body did figure out how to deal with it. You did figure out how to get sleep in this all. You figured out how to eat in this all, how to recover in this all. You adapted.
Yeah,
But
it was painful.
Absolutely.
It was incredibly painful.
Totally. And it took having staff now.
Oh, and it's funny that you say that, because, when I look back at the things that I used to do running things by myself, I'm like, how in the fuck did it, like, doing the laundry, like all of the little list of things. And anybody if anyone runs their own business, like, all the different hats you have to wear, and all the little things that at some point maybe you have the luxury of saying, like, okay, I'm going to delegate that, or I'm going to hire out for that, or whatever steps along the way. But gosh, I just I remember for the first many years, just, you just get it done. Like, my partner Dariush has pictures of me when we met 5 years ago. He has pictures of me, like, at all hours of the day and night with a mop in my hand, like, mopping the entire studio. He's like, you just used to mop all the time. I still do. But, it's just interesting, like, looking back, all the things. And I don't, and I'm not a parent yet. So, Mujib is a dad, a year. Year into your fatherhood.
14 months.
14 months. Happy birthday, Zake. And, for us non-parents, sometimes I'm like, oh God, how do you do that? But you fucking
adapt.
figure it out, right? I mean, I'm on the other side being like, oh my God, like.
Well, it's truly, you adapt or you become a different creature. You know?
Yeah.
Either you adapt, at least that's what I fucking know about myself. Like, if I didn't have good communication with my partner, then I'd be way more angry with my partner. We would have way more clashing. Because now all of a sudden, like, take all the stress of me having everything else that's going on for my business, professionally, personal growth, all that stuff, then take a pandemic, put that on top of it. Now give yourself a new baby too. And I'm sleeping less, but I got to make more money. So now I got more stress and I got to cook more food. Like, but the person who I have become from fucking meeting that shit is, I'm fucking way more of a beast than I was 2 years ago.
You can do anything.
I can do, give me my workload 2 years ago, I'm smashing it.
Yeah.
Like that. And like, give me more, you know, because I've adapted to this higher level of stress and I chose it.
Right.
You know, we chose it. We said on this, we're going to get pregnant in fucking February. We're going to have a baby in October. And that's how we're rocking, you know what I mean? And it worked. We got pregnant late January, had a baby in October. It was awesome. But at the same time, it has made us adapt. And when we look forward in our lives at what else we want to do with our family, and for members of our family that get old fast or that get older, and what are we going to do for them? So all of these different like roles that we see ourselves playing, we're continuously adapting to those different things. And it's stressful, and it does take, you know, it is a crash course. It takes a bit of getting used to at first. Do you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't easy for me to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning the first time I did. Like, I remember the first class that I ever taught, and this is well before I had a kid, but the first class that I ever taught that was like at 6 a.m. class, right? It was like 6 a.m. And, you know, like, I think I was fresh from a restaurant job, that sort of idea. Like a month prior to that, I'd had a restaurant. So like 6 a.m. is like, I've been asleep for 2 hours. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to sleep at 4 o'clock in the morning. You're getting home at 2, eating some food and watching something and falling asleep later. You know what I mean? Like, so I remember going to the man who'd hired me to run the class, and I was like, man, how do you do it? Like, how do you teach at 6 o'clock? Because I'm big on feedback. I'm always going to ask, like, how to go? Was that what you're looking for? Because if you hire me to do something, I want to know that, you know, this is what you hired me to do, you know? And so I'm asking him, and how was it, whatever. And he's like, well, you know, everybody said you seem kind of tired. And I was like, yeah, I'm fucking exhausted, man. Like, how do you get up this, like, what do you do? How do you get up? And he's like, oh, bro, I drink a fucking 60-ounce cup of coffee in the morning. Like, it's not easy for me. He's like, I'm a computer programmer. I just opened a gym, and now we have 6 o'clock classes. You know, he's like, I drink a big ass cup of coffee right when I wake up. It's already brewed and in the fridge. I just drink it cold. Yeah. And then when I get here, I make another cup of coffee. I have that too. And then I just start talking to myself real loud. And then I do that for half an hour before people start coming in. And then I'm fucking jazzed when they get here. I was like, oh, damn. Like, I didn't even think about that. So now I'm going to wake up a half an hour earlier because I was just trying to wake up a half an hour before I had to be there. Now I'm going to wake up an hour before I have to be there. I'm going to talk to myself the whole time that I'm driving to work. I'm playing 2 Chainz. I'm like rapping these, you know what I mean? I'm hyping myself up, but I'm not just hyping myself up. Like, I'm conditioning myself to talk at a certain level, to be boisterous, to be the most awake person in the room. You know? And then, you know, before you know it, like, I love teaching classes that early. I had my first class, you know, quotes on that. But I had my first class this morning pretty early, and I rocked it. It was an awesome class, and I was not tired because I understand my systems. I've adapted to teaching in this way so that I can show up and be on, because I've been up already. I've been on. I got the cobwebs out fucking 3 hours ago.
I can so relate to that because I, you know, previously would teach at 6 a.m. and it was not my preferred time, but to deal with it, and it was not easy, but I would set the alarm long before I really needed to get up. Like, I had to give myself a few stages, and then I had to, because, you know, some people would be like, oh, why do you get up at that time? I'm like, because I'm the person leading the class. Right. I'm not just like, I can't just roll in with my eyes half shut and then, you know, just participate. Right. I have to lead you motherfuckers. So I got to get up. It's my responsibility. I have to get up earlier. Got to find a way to get turned. You know, I did the same thing. Blast the music in the morning, like on my way in. And my commute is actually like 6 minutes. So I get like a song and a half in. But, choose wisely. And then I'm bouncing around and Drake on or whoever. And yeah, roll in. And it was funny because I would always tell my classes, like, I'm not a morning person. And people would be like, what? You're not? And I'm like, I have a routine to get my body and mind ready for you guys. But left to my own devices, I'd sleep in much later. If on days off, like I'm not naturally waking up like that. But I have perfected my routine to be prepared to be in front of you all. And that's just that's what it is. And it's interesting that adaptation never really stuck in terms of, like, I always thought, I don't know why I thought, like, oh, with age will come with, I'll become this morning person. I figured out that I'm not really naturally a morning person per se, but I just, you got to do what you got to do. So like if the schedule says I got to teach at 6 a.m., I'm up at 4:40 a.m. Yeah. And again, with a 6-minute commute, I'm up at 4:40. No, because I have that list of things. I have this like personal protocol, so that I can be like, "What's up, everybody? Let's go!" And people are like, "Holy shit, she's awake! You must be a morning person." I'm like, "No, it's caffeine and it's 2 chains and exactly."
Right, totally.
That one thing I do have to say. So this is great. So I was in a position for a little while here where I found myself teaching 3 6 a.m. classes in a week. So I got to the point where I was like, I don't have to be doing this. I'm like, this is gonna sound douchey. I was like, I'm the boss. Like, I don't need to be teaching 3. Like, I have other people that could teach these time slots. But during this little interim period where I was on the schedule Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday morning, I was like, you know what? For this to work for me, Wednesday's hip hop. Like every Wednesday at 6 a.m., I put it on the schedule, hip hop, explicit.
Damn.
This is how we're waking up.
Right.
And I was like, if you don't want to hear rap music 6 a.m., don't come to my class. And sure enough, like it stuck on the schedule, and the people that were not into it stopped signing up. And trust me, there were plenty of people that were into it, and they wanted to wake up with fucking Dre and like whoever, Jay-Z, whoever. And it was actually my favorite class to teach, because I was like, this is what lights me up. And if I'm gonna have an extra day on my schedule that I am waking up at 4:40, then you're gonna listen to my music.
Yes.
And it was awesome. And then I eventually handed off that time slot because I was like, I'm not coming until later. But what was interesting is that the theme of the class stayed.
Right. Oh, okay. Yes.
So it became, the woman that took it on was like, this is it. This is how we rock out on Wednesdays. And it was great. It had a huge following, and people knew Wednesday mornings.
Yes.
And it's kind of funny.
Well, it makes me think of, you said a routine, and it makes me think of consistency, and how consistency is going to be one of those major tools for adaptation as well. And consistency could mean a lot of different things. It could mean an affirmation in the morning that you say every single time you get up, and trying to make that consistent. It could be the routine that you do. I'm going to wake up, I'm going to make the coffee, I'm going to read this news app, if the coffee's going to finish, I'm going to sit down, take my poop, boom, boom. But trying to be consistent there is going to be the easiest way to make some major adaptation stick, It's like, and you said it right there. Now it's every Wednesday's Hip Hop Wednesday. You know what I mean? And like, people do it now. It's like a real thing.
Yeah,
so
it'll come back, everyone. It'll come back eventually. One other thing that I want to touch on before we wrap up is just kind of the fact that, what this whole pandemic has brought on is this disruption in routine or how we've adapted. It's like I literally never had been on Zoom before 2020 and I'm not, I'm 37. But I just, just sort of the interesting, now it's just interesting to think that, part of what I do now is like, all right, I know the steps to log on and run this program, and this is, how we're going to do. And we've all sort of adapted to certain, maybe you weren't a takeout person and now you find yourself eating takeout 3 times a week, or you never cooked at home, now you're cooking at home all the time. Maybe you're baking, whatever it is. And it will be interesting. I certainly hope for yours and my industry that it is safe to resume in-person activities the way we would like to experience them. I'm hopeful for that. But it is interesting, like what sticks, what do people want, not necessarily to revert back to, but what what are people really going to hold on to and say, like, you know what, I've adapted to this online fitness thing, but I really want to be with people. Like, that's my jam, so I've been thinking about that a lot. How much of these sort of adaptations how much is permanent? How much is I'm doing this because that's what's required of me to survive in this moment? Right? Like, so many of us missing our families across the country, across the world. We're doing this because we can't go see folks right now, but shit, like the second I can get on a plane and see my parents, or when they're vaccinated or whatever, like, I'm going. So it's really it's interesting for me to think about, like, what is this sort of like temporary, like, okay, we're in survival mode, we're doing this because we have to, but like there are some things that I really want to get back to. Like, I want to rage at a concert again. Like, I can't wait. Don't take that away from us. And I don't think that's gone forever.
No, totally.
I really don't.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just my optimism, but it's coming back.
Well, I mean, that's the whole thing about it. It's all, and this is take this how you will for whatever pandemic politics that you have. There are concerts happening every day.
True. True.
There's still shows and clubs to go to. You got to be in Atlanta or something like that. I was talking with a friend of mine down there.
Shout out Atlanta. Shout out Georgia today.
Yeah.
Big election in Georgia today.
Right. But my friend was like, she's like, down here, it's like, damn, this must be where the shit lives, because everybody's out right now. The pool hall's packed. People are partying at the bar, like everything. So just that little tidbit about that. But I think that the pandemic has so many layers of adaptation. It has the personal, like, how do we adapt to this new thing? But then as a globe, like as a world, like, we're figuring out how to adapt the world to be how it is. Like, I was speaking with somebody today. I have protocols in the studio around wiping the kettlebells down and things like that, and everybody's in a mask, and it felt so foreign in the beginning. It was like, I was remarking to this person today how now it feels so natural to me that, like, if I pull a kettlebell out, I spray it off, I wipe it off, I give it to the person. You know what I mean? When they leave, the kettlebells all stay right there. I wipe them off, I put them away, spray the floor down and leave. And it's just like it. If you had told me that that's what I was going to have to do 3 years ago, I'd be like, wow, that sounds like a lot. But then you present this new situation and like, no, that's not a lot at all. In order for me to operate safely, like, that's pretty easy to do, actually. And so again, it's like, we just adapt. I miss dancing so much. And we've been trying to think about like, how do we throw parties again, and like, how do we throw safe parties so that people can interact with each other, and different venues figured it out over the summer, throwing parties where you got your blanket, you come with your pod and you stay on your blanket, and that's how you rock. But hopefully we can mash it up again and all be like winding and grinding. That's the best.
Absolutely.
That's my favorite.
It'll happen. Yeah. It has to.
Yeah. And if it doesn't, we'll go to Iceland. They don't have COVID over there anymore.
That's my favorite island, man. I'm there. I'm so there. It's so funny. I talked about that yesterday. I said to Dariush, I'm like, I cannot wait to go to Iceland again, and it'll happen. Yeah. I was like, maybe I can book my ticket for June, but I don't know if that's too early. But yeah. Oh man! Once again, an amazing,
totally.
Self-affirming. Right? That was amazing. Thank you. It was pretty good. It was really good.
Definitely enjoyed it.
Definitely. Sure. We love this, guys, as always. Thank you guys for listening so much. We want to hear from you. Any topics that have piqued your interest, or we'll just keep going.
Right. Right.
So I want to thank you, Mujib, for bringing up this topic of adaptation, and
awesome.
As usual, there's so much more we could dive into, but
yeah, this was inspired by the 2020 podcast, so if you haven't heard that one, go listen to it and get a sense of why that sparked this one. But I love that about this podcast, how each episode is so inspirational for the next one, and how they feed one so much. There's so much feeding that happens from one to the next to the next, even if we don't intend for that to be how it is. Just by having those conversations and then listening to them again, it brings up more thought. Yeah. So, you know, I'm excited to go and revisit some of the other episodes and just to hear some of these same kind of principles or the same ideas that we brought up today in some of those other episodes as well.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Same. And wherever you are in your journey out there, you know, I wish you the best, of course, and just figuring that out and sending some compassion your way as you try to figure it out and navigate it and yeah, hang in there.
Yeah.
We'll see you guys. Thank you so much. My name is Sarah.
My name is Mujib.
Take care.